This is Jim from realtruth.net. April the 27th, a beautiful Sabbath, 2019. This is a word of encouragement for the believers, and it's really not a video for the unbeliever or the Christian that doesn't believe, or the sinner that doesn't believe. This is an encouragement for those that do believe the word that Yahweh has said to us, that He has given to us. And so I just want to encourage you to stand fast and to hold on, because we are at the end of days and the time is at hand. I'm going to be reading to you from the mechanical translation of the Torah, and I'm going to just be reading in Genesis today. In the mechanical translation, I encourage you to go out and get it. It gives you really good insight to the true meaning of the Hebrew, and it's very, very pertinent for us today. And I'll leave the links in the comment section below to find this translation. A couple things I want to point out real quick before I start is the word "and" in Hebrew is the use of the word "and" within the text has to be kept in mind when reading the biblical account, as it may influence the interpretation of the story. And the word "and," it breaks the sentences up. Instead of periods, they have an "and," because there's no punctuation in Hebrew. So when you see the "and," it's like almost like a period. That's one function of the "and." The other one is that it gives you parallelism. I guess that's how you say it. In other words, it gives you two thoughts of the same thing. Like right here, the use of the word "and" between cherubim and flaming sword suggests two objects guarding the same tree. However, in Hebrew, on the other hand, we'll frequently use the word "and" between two identifiers of the same thing, such as in the following passage that we have here. In other words, the cherubim and the flaming sword are the same thing. And then, like my king and my God, or my Elohim, it's the same thing. In this passage, the words king and God are two names for the same person. So just want to kind of clarify that. You can go get the stuff, study it yourself, get a good understanding of it. But I just want to clarify some of that stuff before we start reading here. And as we read, you will see the real meaning of the words, not the 1500, 1800 translation of the words to the English, but the real meaning of the Hebrew word in English. So that being said, we'll just come here. This is the mechanical translation, the way it looks. In the summit, Bereshit. And what does Bereshit mean? Genesis. That is the name of this book in Hebrew. Bereshit. Genesis. It means in the summit, in the top of the beginning, right? So they translate it in the beginning, but actually, so this is why you'll see it in the summit. Elohim shaped the skies and the land. Now this is the actual MT, mechanical translation, and this is a revised mechanical translation, and it puts the words, kind of shapes them into so you can understand them in English, because if you just read the mechanical, it may not. You have to deduce what the mechanical is saying. So that's what you're going to see here. I have the same thing in the Word. Here it's in here, and it's without the Hebrew in it, which is okay, but I'm just going to read this, and I want you to get a good feeling for this. Now remember, this is for the believer. You unbelievers out there that scoff at this, I wish you would listen, but you won't believe it anyway, so I don't know if it matters. I'm not speaking it to you, I'm speaking this to the believer. So I'm not going to read all of this. Some of it I should, maybe I should, I don't know. I get confused whether I need to read you what is here or have you go read it yourself. But in the summit, Elohim fattened the sky and the land had existed in confusion and was unfilled, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the wind of Elohim was fluttering on the face of the water. And Elohim said, "Light exist," and light existed. And Elohim saw the light, given that it was functional. The light was functional, and this here is something I want to point out to you, because we get into the theological realm and the aspect of evil, good and evil, sin, transgression, in all those terms that is used abstractly, and then people turn it into, are you wearing a suit and tie to church, or are you just wearing your blue jeans? And that's where those kind of things take you. And the actual Hebrew, I mean, think on this. Now you can go to your Strong's Concordance, and it has the 1500s, 1600s bad translation that those men did of Hebrew to English, or Greek to English actually. And they used this word as good. It was good. Well, what does good mean? Very, very abstract. But here, in reality, the Hebrew, and Elohim saw the light, given that it was functional. It was functional. So it was functional. So if something is functional, obviously it's a good thing for us. It's something we need. It's something we cherish. We have it. It's a functional item. And we'll go further on. We'll see when you become dysfunctional, what do we do with something that's dysfunctional? It doesn't work anymore. Your item is dysfunctional. What do you do with it? You discard it. You throw it in the fire. You throw it in the trash. You get rid of it. And really, this is the way Yahweh is looking at this creation. Either you're functional or you're dysfunctional. So, and Elohim saw the light, given that it was functional, and Elohim made a separation between the light and the darkness. And I'm not going to read this whole thing. Elohim called out to the ground, the land, and the collection of the waters. He called out seas, and Elohim saw that it was functional. And Elohim said, the land will make grass sprout, herbs making a sowing of seeds, trees of produce, making produce of his kind, which his seed in him is in him upon the land, and he existed so. And the land brought grass out, herbs, making a sowing of seeds to his kind, and trees making produce, which has his seed in his kind, and Elohim saw that it was functional. And it gets a little bit hard to read when you keep the words in their Hebraic fashion. But the point that I'm making here is that the creation was functional, and evening existed and morning existed, the third day. And why am I bringing that? This is a word of encouragement, right? So why am I bringing it to you in this fashion? Is that Yahweh made the living ones of the land to her kind, and in this translation, the his and her are kept in place, because in Hebrew, every noun has a male and a female ending. So they can either be a male or a female noun. It means nothing to do with the sex. It's just the gender of the noun. So, and Elohim made living ones of the land to her kind, and the beast to her kind, and all the treaders of the ground to his kind, and Elohim saw that it was functional. And then Elohim said, we will make a human in our image, like our likeness, and he will rule the swimmers of the seas and the flyers of the sky and the beasts and all of the land and all of the treaders treading upon the land. And Elohim fattened the human in his image. And I should come back and understand, fatten, he made him in his image. In the image of Elohim he fattened him. Male and female he fattened them. And Elohim respected them. And Elohim said to them, produce and increase and fill the land and subdue her and rule. And Elohim saw all of which he had made, and look, it was much functional. Everything was functioning, and evening existed and morning the sixth day. Everything of creation was functional. Nothing was dysfunctional. It was all working as it should. And the sky and the land and all their armies were finished. And Elohim finished in the seventh day his occupation which he did, and he ceased. And this is called Sabbath. Right here, ceased. Is actually what the Sabbath means. You're ceasing. in the seventh day from all his occupation that he did. And Elohim respected the seventh day, and he set him apart. The seventh day. The day is a masculine. So he didn't set Yhwh apart. He didn't do anything like that. He set that day apart. He set him apart, given that in him he ceased from all his occupation, which Elohim fattened to make. So Elohim ceased from his labors on the seventh day, and he set that day apart, because in it he had ceased from his labors, and that is the functionality of the seventh day. That is the functionality of mankind, to cease from their works on the seventh day. That is our function. And if we don't do that, we become dysfunctional. We are no longer a functioning part of the creation, and we're chaff for the fodder. We are to be blown away and thrown into the fire and burned up because we are dysfunctional. And then he goes on to talk about the making of the land and the sea and the face of the ground. And then we come down to verse 7. And Yahweh the Elohim molded the human from the ground, and he exhaled into his nostrils a breath of life, and the human existed to be a being of life, or a living being. Okay? And so out of the ground he formed the man, and breathed into his nostrils a breath of life. We are the only creature that was created on this earth that had the image of Yahweh in them, the breath of life from Yahweh. All the rest of them have breath, but they're not Yahweh's. He gives them breath, but it's not his spirit that's doing it. Then Yahweh planted the garden and put man in the garden. But let's listen to this, what it says here. And Yahweh the Elohim made all of the trees spring up from the ground, being a craving to appearance and functional for nourishment. Functional. They looked good and they were functional, right? And a tree of life in the midst of the garden. And a tree of discernment of function and dysfunction. So there was a tree there that gave you the discernment of function and dysfunction. And let's see, where are we going here without reading all of it? Because you can get this, you can go to the website, get this and read it. And so on 15, and Yahweh the Elohim took the human, he caused him to be deposited in the Garden of Eden, and to serve her and guard her. The garden is feminine, okay? And it doesn't mean there's a feminine God and a feminine spirit and all this garbage that people put out there. And remember, I'm talking to you, believer, now. This is grammar. These are grammatical genders only. Do not ask me why there are such things as grammatical genders in the language. Well, I do know why. Because in the book of Enoch, one of the sins of the fallen ones, one of the sins of the sons of God, of Elohim, that came and mated with the daughters of men, and gave things to men that men were not to have. One of those sins, one of those dysfunctional things that was given unto man was writing. Now get it, it was writing. In other words, what we are doing here, it was a dysfunctional thing given to man. We have it. We're a fallen world, so we use these things in our fallen world. But it was never meant to be that way. That's another whole video in of itself. But so that's why this is probably why this is this way, because it makes people turn upside down and go backwards, because they can't understand. But the believer can understand, and this is what I'm saying. If you believe what is here, if you understand it, then this is for you. In 16, then, for chapter 2, Genesis 2:16, Yahweh the Elohim directed upon the human, saying, of all the trees of the garden, in eating you will eat, and of the tree of discernment of function and dysfunction you will not eat from him, given in the day that you eat from him, a dying you will die. And Yahweh the Elohim said, it is not functional for the human existing by himself. I will make him a helper, such as his opposite. And this, folks, this is where we're getting into why is the LGBT, the gay, lesbian, transgender, all that garbage, why is that fodder for the fire? Why is that going to be destroyed? Why are people walking in that way going to die the dying? Because it is dysfunctional, and this is why it is dysfunctional. It's dysfunctional from the beginning, the foundations of the earth, from the creation. And Yahweh the Elohim formed from the ground all the living ones of the field and all the flowers of the sky, and he brought to the human to see what he will call out for them, and all of which the human will call out for to him a being of life. He was his title. In other words, he called the names of the beasts, and the human called out all the titles of the beast and of the flyers and the ones of the field. For the human he did not find a helper opposite him. And Yahweh made a trance fall upon the human, and he slept, and he took a unit from his ribs, and he shut the flesh under his ribs, okay? Not her, didn't change Adam into a female, okay? Didn't do anything. This is a gender under her, under it. You could say it, but in this translation it keeps the gender of the noun. And Yahweh the Elohim built the rib which he took from the human for a woman, and he made her come to the human. And the human said, this time is bone from my bones and flesh from my flesh, and for this she will be called out woman, given that from man this was taken. Therefore a man will leave his father and his mother, and he will adhere with his woman, and they shall exist as one, as a flesh unit. And the two of them The human and his woman existed nude, and they were not ashamed of themselves. And this is the functionality of creation. This is the functional way Yahweh made it. And if you have a man and a man, and a woman and a woman, or a man who thinks he's a woman, or a woman who thinks she's a man, or something in between, you are dysfunctional. And this is why Paul says in the New Testament, and it's said in the New Testament, that the homosexual and men with men and those people that are doing those things are going into the lake of fire. This is why Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. They were dysfunctional beings of creation. When you transgress the law of God, when you transgress the functionality of creation, you become a dysfunctional part of creation, and you will be thrown into the lake of fire. You'll be destroyed. You'll be done away with. That is just the bottom line. There is no other way to say it. It's not hate speech, it's reality. And so that's my word of encouragement. I don't want to go too long on this. I want to keep it short here. We can go into chapter 3 and talk about what happened after they ate. Well, I don't know. We're talking about being functional and dysfunctional. Chapter 3, the serpent existed a subtle one from all the fields, and he tempted Eve, and he said of the he asked Eve what she could eat, and Eve responded and said that you're not to eat or touch that functional or dysfunctional tree because you're going to die. And what did the devil say? What did that evil one? He said, the serpent said to the woman, dying you will not die. Given that Yahweh is knowing that in the day you eat from him, the tree, then your eyes will be opened and you will exist like Elohim, knowing function and dysfunction. And the woman saw that the function of the tree was for nourishment, and she was yearning, and its yearning to the eyes, and the tree was craving to make calculations, and she took from his produce, and she did eat. And their eyes were opened. And the curse came. We got the knowledge of function and dysfunctional ways, and we have that today. You can get this, you can read it. I'll leave the link in the bottom. And Yahweh the Elohim said, though the human had existed like a unit from us to discern function and dysfunction, and now otherwise he will send his hand, and he will take also of the tree of life, and he will eat, and he will live to a distant time. And Elohim sent him from the garden to serve the ground from which he was taken. And he cast out the human and the Kiriv sword, and a blazing one dwelt at the east end of Eden, the sword overturning herself to guard the road to the tree of life. We were banned from the tree of life because we had the knowledge of function and dysfunctionality. Because we could now discern function and dysfunction. Transgression is dysfunctionality, and it's to be thrown out, it's to be done away with. To be functional in the kingdom of Yhwh, to be functional to Yahweh, you have to be in obedience. You have to follow His way. You have to follow the creation. You have to adhere to it. And so anyone not is dysfunctional and chaff for the fire. So may Yahweh bless His word, and may this be an encouragement to the believers to hold fast, hang on. The end is real close, and these days are getting more and more evil, and they're not going to get better. So be encouraged. The more evil it becomes, the closer we are to the end. So may Yahweh bless you and keep you and make His face shine upon you. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.